to continue to run the football, something that you and I have talked about on this show, making the aforementioned Mike McGlinchey sick of the running questions. But yeah, they're good at run blocking. They're better at running than they are passing. We'll talk about Russell Wilson tomorrow. We've got a big hot show for you tomorrow about Russ, but today's all about that ground game. Today's about Javonte looking more like Javonte. Today's about those guys up front blocking their hind ends off and helping the Broncos on this 2-game, whatever it is.
Couplet, aberration, revival. I wouldn't even say revival. That actually may be a better way of describing it. That they've given themselves a shot. They've revived themselves. Yeah. A bit of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR on the season.
Yeah. And that comes from the rushing attack because we've talked about the defensive turnaround. And yes, even I just on the drive was like, we need to praise Vance Joseph as the guy who wanted him fired, still thinks he gets fired. But like, we need to praise that turnaround. But what helps the turnaround isn't only Fabian Moreau. It isn't only the pass rushers, the return of Baron Browning. It's also the ground game. People may not realize that, but the rushing game is tied to your defensive attack just the same way as your pass rush is tied to your secondary. Because if you can run the ball, use up time of possession, wear down your opponent, and keep your defense fresh, that helps you out on both sides.
It is Mike McGlinchey who says the running game is all 22, not just the 11 on offense, because it's a matter of pace as well. And the other phrase that gets thrown around often is complementary football. And with what this team is and what its strengths are, sticking to the ground game probably is the best path forward here to play that kind of complementary football, right? And we saw it against Kansas City. Look, there was a pretty narrow path for the Broncos to win that game. It involved controlling the pace on the ground on offense, and then the defense playing well enough to allow the ground game to have those opportunities, right? I pointed out on denversports.com, if you start with the running game in particular, that the teams that against Patrick Mahomes-led Chiefs clubs, the teams that won the time of possession battle and ran more than 50% of the time were 9-2 going into Sunday. Well, now that's 10-2, right? So that's the formula, is be able to have sustained drives and keep it on the ground. That's the formula. That's the kryptonite for Kansas City. And the thing is, for the Broncos, it just happens to be their best path to success because the passing game, and this is where we're going to get into with Russell Wilson when we do the show tomorrow, it's just not consistent enough.
Right. And I know that Mike brings up here the 5 takeaways and all those sorts of things. Every game is like a snowflake. It's its own unique thing. But I'll say this in defense of the rushing attack, which is my brand of football. Even the Commanders ran to get back in it against Denver. And what was that score?
And they kept running. Yes. 21-3. Then that's another thing. If you're behind 3 scores in the second quarter, that is not the point at which you abandon the run.
Right.
If you're behind 2 scores in the fourth quarter, early in the fourth quarter at least, maybe later it's different, but early in the fourth quarter, I don't think you abandon the run then. And actually, to the Broncos' credit, when they were playing in Kansas City the first time, they did end up passing more than they threw, but they did stick with that run game even as they were behind 2 scores into the second half, okay? So that was a sign of progress. But yeah, to abandon the run and just throw, to me, it's a pretty high threshold in terms of where the score is and what the game situation is, right? But I think the Broncos did abandon it too soon, whereas you mentioned Washington in week 2. That was a team that did not abandon it, that stuck with it, and it got them back in the game. Of course, the flip side of that sees for Washington is that even when it was 21-3, they were moving the ball pretty consistently to that point. They'd already had one scoring drive, another drive that ended in this field goal. So they already had the tangible evidence that what they were doing was working in terms of game flow, even though it wasn't evident on the scoreboard, and that gave them the window to come back.
Right. And I understand people may get uncomfortable with what we're seeing late. Mike brings it up here on Facebook. Like he averages 1.8 yards per carry in the fourth quarter.
Uh,
When you're soaking up that lead and the teams, we mentioned it recapping the Chiefs game. Like, yeah, he was 3.8 a carry on the day and 1.8 carry in the fourth quarter. But you're at the end of the game, you're just using up time of possession. It's a different sort of weapon than it is early on, but you must maintain that weapon.
yeah, exactly. You have to keep with it. You have to understand that you're playing the long game, right? That you're focused on gradually wearing down an opponent. And then the flip side of that is, in the positive side, if you do that, then you're limiting their shots. You go into Buffalo in 12 days, that's going to be the type of game where you want to wear them down, not only to exact a physical toll, but to also limit the opportunities. And we even though it wasn't so much with the ground game, in terms of game pace, we sort of saw that in week one, even though the Broncos lost, right? Some sustained drives. That was a low possession game. That was to an extreme, obviously, that you don't ordinarily see. But each team had, I think, what, a combined 11 non kneel down possessions. The problem in that game was that the defense didn't do its job in terms of the all 22 being involved. The defense didn't do its job to get off the field, right? And allow the offense to control the game on the ground. The last few weeks we've seen it. The key to making this work, if you look back on it, and it's funny to say this, but the key to making the Broncos ground game work was the defense getting itself right after being so very wrong for nearly all of the first 4 games of the season.
Right. And defense got it right. Broncos have tried with Russell Wilson. More on that tomorrow. Tomorrow's show is going to be electric. And
Is it
today,
no, it's going to be, as Russell Wilson himself said in a Subway commercial, spicy.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it's going to be. Today, we're more like a steam engine. We're plugging along, and Andy brings
Like
it up
a
in the
ground
chat
game.
room.
We're doing the today is the ground game show, so it sort of takes on that flow and identity, right?
Right, right. Locomotive, get that cattle guard on the front. We're going to push you out of the way, right? And you have your Javonte, Pirine, and Jaleel. And I agree with Andy. Like, not many teams have that kind of luxury. Look at Buffalo, your next opponent. They just signed Leonard Fournette. It ain't playoff Lenny yet. But if they want to, because here's the thing, and I'm going to say it to scare people, but I'm not scaring people. This is playoff style football. When the calendar, when the weather turns, I hope the weather's good for you in Wisconsin, brother.
It's gray and cold. It's not
gray and cold. Okay. It's a little bit like that today here. But like if you weather turns, the calendar turns, it's a month from now, December. You have to play this sort of style, especially if you're playing in those places like Denver, Kansas City, Green Bay, Buffalo. You got to run the ball.
You know what's interesting though is that you don't get many of those games, at least on the road this year. I mean, you get Buffalo, right? And then the Broncos are at home twice. It could be nice those 2 days, those 2 Sundays against Minnesota, Cleveland. And then they have the 3-game road swing. But look where the games are. Houston, retractable roof. LA, roof, and it's LA. Detroit, fixed roof in climate-controlled comfort. So it's funny that we're talking about those late season conditions, and yet when the Broncos go on the road, they don't see that. Their last game of the season is in Las Vegas, another fixed roof, climate-controlled comfort there at Allegiant Stadium, right? So it's sort of weird how this thing ended up breaking. There's a decent chance that the worst weather game of the season for the Broncos, and this is based on how flaky Denver's climate can be, there's a decent chance that the worst weather game might have already happened.
Right. Right. And if you like 4 seasons, come to Colorado. They'll happen all in one day. I do want to highlight something Mike brings up here in the chat room about Williams and his backup. This resurgence of the ground game has to do with the defense figuring it out, has to do with Javonte looking more like his old self. They still don't necessarily trust Jaleel all the way. But Pirine and the lack of work, is that something that has surprised you this season? Or is it just like trying to work Javonte back, trying to get Jaleel some explosive touches, and that's just what's left over for Pirine? Because the ground game is the way they make this thing work. But if Javonte gets a little bit nicked up, a little bit dinged up, like he looks great now, it's week 10 the next time they're going to play. If he's not looking great in week 13, you're going to need a guy like P. Ryan to do more.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Samaje Perine right now is his touches aren't being limited because of Javonte Williams. They're being limited because of Jaleel McLaughlin. And Samaje Perine's skill set has a lot of crossover on the Venn diagram with that of Javonte Williams. So effectively, I think the way to think of these running backs is like this. Samaje Perine is there to be the primary back if Javonte Williams is injured, right? But in terms of how they want it to go, they want one power back and one speed, shifty, change of pace back, right? And as a result, because Jaleel McLaughlin is the contrast to that, he ends up just always having that role, whereas Samaje Perine's, and this is just how it's evolved, and it evolved partially because of what we saw with life without Javonte there when you lost him in week 4 in Chicago. They saw enough from Jaleel McLaughlin to where effectively he's the number 2 back. The interesting thing would be if Javonte Williams gets injured again, how they distribute the touches, because I don't know that they want Jaleel McLaughlin having a game like Javonte Williams did, where Javonte, he touched the ball on Sunday 30 times, 27 carries, 3 receptions. There's no way Jaleel is getting that many touches if they have to turn to him.
Right. What's interesting, and most of the time this is like a fantasy take, but it's real football this time, Mace. Mm-hmm. Jaleel's the number 2, and if Javonte gets hurt, Jaleel's the number 2.
Yeah.
Maybe probably a little bit more work.
It's probably 50-50, I think, if it's Samaje and Jaleel. But yeah, that's kind of how you have to think of it. Okay, here's another way to think of it. The Broncos in recent years have thought of nickel corner, slot corner, as a separate position from the outside corners, right? Mm-hmm. And so the depth chart reflects that. It's not like it was remember when Chris Harris Jr. was here and he was really getting going in 2011, 2012. And then what they settled on with Chris, and this really kicked in after Bradley Roby and Aqib Talib arrived, is that when they were in base and they had only 2 cornerbacks, Chris would play outside. When it came time to play nickel and you had that third corner in there, Chris bounced inside to play slot, right? And then Bradley Roby played on the outside. Chris could handle that because he was a special dude and he was really smart and could literally learn 2 different positions and everything you had to do tactically from week to week. And so that, I think, kind of confused Broncos country a little bit to think, oh, that's what you do with a slot corner. He's the guy that you can move inside and then back outside. But that's an exceptional circumstance. It usually looks more like this, where you've got nickel corner as a separate spot than outside corner, right? Mm-hmm. And so think of the running backs the same way. RB1, every down back, that's Javonte Williams, then Samaje Perine. RB2, shifty back, that's Jaleel McLaughlin. Unfortunately for the Broncos, they don't have another guy who can fill the same type of role, not on the 53-player roster. And I would argue even a guy like Tyler Beatty is not somebody who could fill that role if something happened to Jaleel.
Yeah, and with Jaleel, I think I said this to Philip Lindsay, because I've always said Jaleel's like Philip Lindsay with hands. Although Phil did have a wrist injury that he tried to play through, and that's why it looked like he was stabbing at the football. So I give him credit for that. But with Jaleel, Phil was never a pile pusher, but if he'd meet contact, he'd usually fall forward, right?
Right.
I've seen too many times with Jaleel, like he'll get contact, like a little bit of contact, and he'll be like, woo, and fly back. And that, I'm sure the team is seeing that. And that's where he's different from Philip Lindsay, because Lindsay at least would kind of like stubbornly push forward or fall forward, or at least go sideways. Jaleel gets a contact and he loses his feet and he flies in the air. And that doesn't give you confidence to give a guy, 20 touches a game.
Right. But it's interesting that when he is out there, you see more and more designing plays to get him to the edge faster, right? Take advantage of that extraordinary quickness and speed that he has. I mean, there was one play on Sunday and he got outside and we're watching it up in the press box. And I said, look, the only player on the roster who could get to that spot that quickly is Joe McLaughlin. Not even Marvin Mims Jr. could get there that fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's got some special talent to him.
He does. And once he gets the open field, then it's on. And if you're a defender, the pucker factor is very high.
He scares you.
Right? Yes, very much so.
And
He's this is maybe one of the few players on this offense that does scare you.
Okay. And this a bigger point that I have, and we all continue to ask, why don't we see more of Marvin Mims Jr.? Because I think there are two players on that offense that if you're a defensive coordinator, they're going to keep you up at night. And it's interesting that neither of them are among the base starters, right? Because we're talking about Joe McLaughlin and Marvin Mims Jr. Mm-hmm. Those are the guys that make defensive coordinators nervous, like you say, the pucker factor. My daughter just gave me a Halloween candy. Hey, can I have a Reese's, please? Thank you, Charlotte. I don't think she liked giving me that because she doesn't like. I don't think she likes giving up the Reese's. But yeah,
the Reese's is the good stuff, man.
Oh, she told me it's because she has a lot of Twix and not a lot of Reese's. Okay.
Oh, okay. Are they the left Twix or the right Twix?
Oh, you know what? It's actually labeled here. See? Let me put that.
There you go.
The right
Twix. Okay.
Is there a difference?
No.
I didn't think so.
No.
Oh, and now she just gave me a
left one. Okay. So the package is a little different. There you go.
And I have, hey, who is that? Oh, I got a visitor.
Okay.
I got a visitor. I got Cooper. Is that Ruby or Cooper? Oh, that's Cooper. Ruby, come here.
That's Zoe.
Zoe's here. All right, we got.
Wow.
Cool. Hi. How you guys? Oh, hello. All right. They're gonna come with you, Charlotte. Okay. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Special guest appearance. What did Charlotte think of your wig?
You know what? I gotta check and see if she's seen it. See, I don't think she watched the show yesterday.
Oh man, so she didn't like, comment, share, subscribe?
No, my mom did. Okay. My daughter didn't.
Okay.
So, skipped I was on the show. My mom watched it. My daughter will watch it later, Mm-hmm. But I'll have to explain it to her. I don't think we've had the Wayne's World discussion yet. We're probably at the brink here of starting to introduce some old school stuff that Dad loved. That now that she's 11 years old. We'll probably start attacking the John Hughes catalog at some point here.
Okay.
In the next couple of years,
right?
You
get around 12, 13.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I think, is one we'll probably sit down and watch at some point. By the way, I've been aware of this for a while, but you ever hear of the Fight Club theory on Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
No.
Okay. Well, I don't think we're not spoiling anything on Fight Club. It's a 24-year-old movie. If you haven't seen it, that's your problem. But the notion of like a character being something that you invent in your mind, right? Well, the theory is that Cameron Fry in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, that Ferris Bueller's actually invented in his mind and the whole thing is a hallucination, that he's actually just sick. Like we see him,
right?
The first time we see him, he's in his bed. There are all these medicines all over the place. That he actually, the whole thing is a hallucination, reflecting like how he wants to take on his parents, basically. How his father, especially.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch that now with that theory in mind.
Mm-hmm.
But Nate reminds you, what's the first rule of Fight Club, Mace?
Don't talk about Fight Club.
Exactly.
But wait, here's another thing to think about, and this is like on the whole theory of it being a hallucination. There is no way they could do all those things that they do in one day, okay? Mm-hmm. Unless they spend like one inning at Wrigley Field. And who's going to Wrigley Field for a baseball game for one inning, right? I'm just saying.
Right.
They crash a parade, have a fine lunch, visit. Is it I think it's the Art Institute of Chicago. Get to a baseball game. Drive back and forth, and it's clear they don't get going for a little bit. I don't think they head to the city until what, like 10:30 or so in the morning. I mean, they burn off a lot of the morning.
Right.
Sloane's already in class when they call her out to tell her that that her it's her grandmother, right? Tell her one of her grandparents died.
Mm-hmm.
And then do you have a kiss for daddy?
Oh, that's right. That is
yes.
right. I want to bring this up. I know it's orange and blue today, but Skunk Life Media says, have we all had a collective laugh at the Raiders yet? This is an unusual move to see coach and general manager fired overnight. A Halloween nightmare for Josh McDaniels.
The GM getting sacked a year and a half in as well. Yeah, that it's funny. Like, I'm not surprised at Josh McDaniels getting fired. It happens with coaches getting into year 2, year 3 all the time, right? Clearly, there's a disconnect. Mark Davis has made his displeasure clear. You wonder if one of the final straw events turned out to be starting Brian Hoyer instead of Aiden O'Connell when they went to Chicago. Like, and you and I have talked about this. What good is playing Brian Hoyer? You know who and what he is, right?
Right.
At least with Aiden O'Connell, you start finding out whether he can be a potential solution. So I wonder, and because we have Jimmy G dealing with another injury, I wonder if one of the things that happened yesterday was Josh McDaniels intending to start Brian Hoyer again instead of the rookie out of Purdue University.
Right.
And the GM getting caught up in it. Well, this just tells you how, tied together they were, right? They were a package deal. Where Dave Ziegler, both former Broncos employees. Now, of course, Josh McDaniels, former Broncos head coach Dave Ziegler, worked in the front office for a time, about the same time as McDaniels did too. And I believe Dave Ziegler did actually interview for the Broncos GM job a couple of years back.
Did Champ Kelly get that job or Antonio Pierce? Because I read 2 reports.
Champ Kelly is the interim GM. Antonio Pierce is the interim coach.
Okay.
Let's just say on Antonio Pierce, the career is mixed. He was at Long Beach Poly several years ago, one of the truly iconic high school football programs in this country. And that's a place where basically it's a farm system for college football, right? Long Beach Poly missed the playoffs 2 years while Antonio Pierce was their coach, and then they parted ways. Somehow he falls upward to the staff at Arizona State, coaching linebackers, and what happens at ASU, he becomes defensive coordinator, I believe, and then he was actually co-defensive coordinator with Marvin Lewis for a bit, and then went on to run the entire defense. But all the NCAA stuff that went on down there, he got mixed up with that, right? The violations that happened, and of course, like this year, ASU is self-sanctioning. They're not a good team, but they self-sanctioned their way out of postseason play for this year, anyhow. And so he goes from that to the NFL, to the Raiders, and now he's going to be an interim head coach. So the career arc of Antonio Pierce is, I can't think of a better term to describe it than wacky. Doesn't make a lot of sense on the surface, but he is kind of falling upward, and now he's going to get 9 games here to run it. Champ Kelly is the interim GM.
Broncos interviewed him, correct? And I like Champ a lot.
He worked for the Broncos, and he worked for the Broncos for a while too.
Mm-hmm. It could, if he does a good job and he gets the regular GM job, I mean, that's a problem within your own division. Champ Kelly's got a hell of an eye for talent.
Yeah, he does. And he of course, his path diverged when he went to Chicago along with John Fox back in 2015 as well to work on the personnel side there. And now he's gone out to Vegas. But there's a lot of laughter coming from Broncos country on Josh McDaniels, even though the Raiders with McDaniels beat the Broncos all 3 times they played. That was the one thing that Josh McDaniels and the Raiders did right, was beat the Broncos. But I mean, there's a lesson here. There's a lesson here for anyone running a team. And the lesson is, look closely at what your team is at a moment. And let's go back to the Raiders at the end of the 2021 season. Rich Bisaccia somehow, despite all sorts of chaos, the tragedy on the road that was caused by Henry Ruggs, who's now in jail, obviously for being a DUI in that. John Gruden being forced out because of racist, homophobic, misogynistic comments and emails that he put out there.
When the league was investigating Dan Snyder.
Yeah.
Like and Gruden's not the only one, everyone. I hate to tell you how the sausage is made, but like that was Gruden getting fired for what probably quite a few coaches have put out there.
Yeah. It was actually something interesting that Gruden, of course, is well connected in Tampa, and there was a late arena football coach down there who kind of got brought down by some similar stuff regarding the emails, the late Tim Markham. And they all kind of ran in the same circles. Let's just say, when I saw the comments from John Gruden in those emails, I wasn't particularly surprised.
Well,
right?
You want to surprise people now, Mace, because Gruden's still doing consulting. Like, there's still NFL types that I know that don't officially reach out to John Gruden, but John Gruden is in their contact list.
Yeah. So, but anyway, they move on for him. Rich Bisaccia somehow, in the midst of all this tumult, gets the Raiders to the playoffs. He had the locker room came together. I mean,
players love him.
Not only they love him, they played a disciplined, poised style of football for him. I'll always recall when, I think it was not long after he took the job, they came into Denver, and the Broncos were 3-2, and the Raiders were just everything seemed to be spinning out of control. And it was the Raiders that looked more disciplined, more focused, had a better game plan than the Broncos. The Broncos looked, it looked like a kindergarten fire drill out there. And the Raiders, in the midst of all that, appeared to be playing with themselves, and they dominated that game. And, you saw that over the course of the season. You saw them get to the playoffs and nearly beat Cincinnati in the wild card round. How Mark Davis looked at that and said, we need to go in a completely different direction. And, oh, by the way, and, as bad as the things that John Gruden wrote in the emails are, that was a team that was on a upward trajectory. 4-12 to 7-9 to 8-8 to 10-7 in the playoffs, right? So clearly there was something good going on there. Me, if I'm running the team, I'm thinking, okay, I'll give this coach a 3-year contract. Let's see if we can't continue this upward trend, right? It was a very steady build. And of course, Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler coming from New England, they're disruptors and they start messing things up. And it's been a free fall. They took an offense that was pretty efficient, added Devontae Adams, got rid of Darren Waller. They don't know how to use Hunter Renfrow. I don't understand that at all. He's as good a slot receiver as you'll find in the league, and they just basically ignore him. And their offense is third worst in the league in scoring offense this year, right? Josh McDaniels is really good at destroying things. He's like a toddler.
Ask Darren Waller.
Yeah.
Didn't have to get rid of Darren. Just had to keep your mouth shut, Josh. And, well, that didn't happen.
Yeah, real.
Well, and on personal stuff, too, man. You want to get married. You want it to be like a private thing. And, Josh McDaniels is running his mouth.
Spouting off at the combine about it.
Right.
And understand there's a reason why Darren Waller and Kelsey Plum wanted everything be private. I mean, they're both very public people because Kelsey Plum is a gold medal winner, arguably the best player in the WNBA right now. I mean, you understand why they would want things to be quiet on their special day. And no, this guy just yaps his gums, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah. Josh, I feel safe in saying that Josh McDaniels will never be a head coach in the NFL again.
Yes.
Because you could, Bill Belichick couldn't even sell him in New England. Besides, if Bill gets his way, it's going to be Gerard Mayo. It's not going to be anybody else who gets that job. It's going to be Mayo that succeeds him.
Right.
That's that plan is set. But yeah, I hope Josh likes being an assistant, because that's the only role he's going to have. But the question is, I mean, he's so toxic right now. What do they do? His life may be taking those 4.5 years of paychecks to not coach football for the Las Vegas Raiders and just cashing in. That's not bad work if you can get it, by the way. This is another thing. It's still pretty good to be Josh McDaniels. You're about to get paid handsomely 4.5 years for doing nothing. I mean, you've got Super Bowl rings from your time as an assistant with the Patriots. Man, I'd take that. I'd take my traveler's checks and go to a competing resort.
I said no salt in the margarita. By the way, I think Josh McDaniels in the Hall of Fame in Canton. It's a high school Hall of Fame.
Yeah, the McKinley High School Hall of Fame.
So you can say I'm a Hall of Famer in Canton High School, but either way.
Yeah, oh goodness gracious. Yeah, he's kind of a legend back there.
Yeah.
Not a legend in Colorado and not a legend in Nevada.
Not at all. That is a wrap for Orange and Blue today. He is Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammy. Do the YouTube things, like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. And we appreciate you all very much for watching. He's Mace. I'm C's. OBT is a BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. And would you please stay frosty,